going to do a traditional Italian meatball. This is the recipe that I got from my mother, and I'm sure she got it from her mother. And I remember my mother making these and my grandmother making these. The only difference is that I use just ground beef. They would occasionally mix it with ground pork as well as the ground beef. Some people put veal in there. I like it plain with just the beef. So this is an 80%, and you can get away with 80%. It gives it a lot of flavor, and the grease from the meatballs will drip down because I use a broiling pan. I bake my meatballs, I don't fry them. Okay, so here we have about maybe a pound and a half, maybe a pound and 3/4 of 80% hamburger. You have to understand now, when my Italian mother and my Italian grandmother cooked, they didn't measure anything. There's no records of measurements. Everything was just put a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and that's how I learned how to cook. This is 1 tablespoon of salt, and again, I'm just going to sprinkle it across the top. And when I feel that there's enough, then I stop. And it's just a question of, it's hands-on kind of thing. That's not even a tablespoon, so that might be 3/4 of a teaspoon, maybe a little bit more than that. Do the same thing with the pepper. The pepper I use, it's the same thing. I've got about a tablespoon in here, but I'm just going to just do that, maybe a little bit more. And this is a hit or miss kind of situation when you first start, but then after a while, just how many little dabs to put in there. You'll know which is the right amount. And then we start with the parsley. Again, a little more parsley. This is about 2 tablespoons of parsley. And again, I just sprinkle it across the top until I feel okay. That's about it. And we'll see that we had maybe 1.5 tablespoons of parsley in there. And then we have the garlic is at 1 tablespoon. And again, I'm just going to sprinkle it across the top. And when I feel as if I've put enough in there, I'm going to stop. And this is just a question of doing it. I've been doing this for 55 years, so I pretty much know when to stop. And we're down to a little bit under a tablespoon of garlic left. So that means I used a little bit more than a tablespoon of garlic. All right, now I'm going to mix this up, because I want to disperse those seasonings throughout all of the meat so that you get a nice even taste when you bite into a meatball. You don't want to get a bite with pepper or a bite with salt and no garlic and parsley in it. All right, now I've measured out about not quite 2 cups of breadcrumbs. These are the Italian seasoned breadcrumbs. And again, I do it the same way. I'm just going to sprinkle across the top. And when I think I've got enough, okay, I put in maybe 1.5 cups of breadcrumbs. Let's see how this looks. And this is the point where I'm going to start using my hands. My hands are clean, but I'll wash them one more time. Okay, so I'm going to start with that 1.5. I don't know if I'm going to need to add more. I'll have to feel the mixture. When I get through adding the eggs, I'm going to start with 1. And I'm going to do another one. Depending on how much hamburger and breadcrumbs, I'll go with 2 today because I'm not really doing a big batch of meatballs. Okay, now I'll just mix this up a little bit, and then I'm going to use my hands to mix it the rest of the way. Okay, now I've mixed this up pretty well. It's mixed up pretty well, but in my hand, it's too tight. It's too tight. It's going to make a hard meatball. So what I'm going to do is add just a little bit more breadcrumbs. Yeah, I'm going to use my hands again. You don't want to use too much breadcrumbs because then they get too bready. They're too bready tasting. But you don't want all meat either. I don't like a meatball that's almost all meat. I like it mixed up with the breadcrumbs, or either the one in the can or the fresh breadcrumbs that you can make yourself. Okay, that looks good. This is the canola. You could use the olive oil if you wish, but this is canola. And all I do is spray a little bit of it because I don't want them to stick, that's all. Now, what I do is I don't make my meatballs too big. I know sometimes you see meatballs that are gigantic, but I don't make them too big. And you just take them a little bit. This is about the size that I make them. And you have to roll them pretty good because you want them to be nice and solid. Otherwise, see how nice that is? Otherwise, it'll fall apart when it's cooking. We don't want that to happen. Okay, so this is about, like I told you, close to 2 pounds, maybe 1.75 pounds. And with 1.75 pounds, probably could get about 18 meatballs this size. And try to make them all the same size so that they will cook evenly. Otherwise, you're going to have some cooked and some not cooked. And don't forget, these will only be partially cooked. I'm only going to cook these for about 15 minutes. And then I put them right into a sauce that I will be making. Probably you've noticed that I do not use onions. And that's for a couple of reasons. Number one, I never did use onions to make my meatballs. And I love onions, but for some reason, the meatballs, I don't use it. Second reason is some people may have a problem with onions with their digestive system. All right, so here we have, like I said, not quite 2 pounds, and I've got 2, 4, 5, 10, 15, 18 meatballs, which is just about right. Okay, now these are ready to go into the oven, and I'm only going to cook them for 15 minutes. Then I'm going to turn them and brown. I'll brown one side, then I'm going to turn them, brown the other side, then I'm going to take them out. And then by the time these come out of the oven, I will have my sauce started. So in the meantime, we're ready now, and this is going to go into the oven. Here they go. 15 minutes, then I'll take them out, turn them over, and then brown the other side. You want to get a nice crust on them to keep those, to seal in all the moisture. There you go. Okay, terrific. Okay, so I will now proceed to make the gravy. This is pepperoni. It's got a nice spicy taste to it, and it makes a delicious sauce. My grandkids really love it. There's only a couple of brands that I like. This one is Margarita. This is a vacuum sealed. If you could possibly get the one that is not vacuum sealed. The vacuum sealing makes it a little bit too soft, but it's still good. It's still very good. This is the only one they happen to have. So what I'm going to do is just cut these into manageable bite size. I don't like to put big chunks. I'm just going to cut it into maybe about, maybe an inch or so. Just do this. And once I get through doing this, I'll just take it. I'm going to just, let me just add this into the pan and stop this. I'm just going to put it on low heat. I want to get some of the oils out of this sausage because that's what gives it the great flavor. And what I'll do with this is I simply will brown this on both sides until some of the oils start to come out. And then I will add the tomatoes to it. And once the meatballs are done, I just throw the meatballs in here too and then just let it simmer for at least 5 or 6 hours. You do this at a very low heat because you don't want to burn it. You just want to cook it a little bit until the oil starts to come out. Maybe get a little bit, now see, this is a good one. See, a little bit crusty. You don't want to overdo it because then it'll be burnt and you don't want it to be burnt. But as soon as the oils are starting to come out now, I like to throw a can of tomato puree into my sauce because I like that consistency. But then I also like to add some like chunky tomatoes too into it. So right now all I'm going to do is add this. You can hear it sizzle. And I've got it on a low heat because we just want to bring this to a simmer, that's all. And I am going to add a little bit of water just to clean out that can because this is thick. And as you continue cooking the sauce, it gets even thicker, so because you lose the water. All right. Now that's not going to be quite enough. This is a crushed tomato. It's got a little more thickness to it, so I'm just going to add that to it. I use the Tutoroso. This is good. Any Italian brand is good. I like any of the Italian tomatoes. This one is not. This is good. I got this because it was on sale.
Only the best for the meatball recipe that will be remembered long into posterity.
All right, now the next step is to get this simmering a little bit, and then we'll take the meatballs out of the oven, and they're just about done now. So why don't we do that? I'll get the meatballs out. I'm going to add the meatballs to the sauce, and then I'm just going to let it simmer for the next maybe 5 or 6 hours. You can see that these are crusted, which is what I wanted because that keeps the moist inside, and that's where the flavor is. So I'm just going to add these into the sauce, and of course these meatballs will get softer the longer they cook. And the longer they cook in the sauce, the better tasting they are too. I'm just going to stir this up, get the sauce over the meatballs. Oops. And splash myself with sauce. That happens all the time. That's it. That's all there is to it. I keep them once you bring it to a simmer. This is not simmering just yet, but once I bring it to a simmer, which is a very low boil, just barely, the bubbles are just barely bursting through the surface of the sauce. That's a simmer. That's what we want. We don't want to boil. Okay? All right, so we'll wait. Okay, this is what I was talking about. You see, this is bubbling a little bit too hot. I don't like it to bubble like that. To me, that's not a simmer. So what I'm going to do is just bring it down until it's barely breaking the surface. Now, see, that's still a little bit too much, but I did drop it down a couple of notches. I usually get it down to about a 2 on an electric stove. As long as it's doing this. See that? There. And then while it's on the stove cooking all those hours, just every once in a while, maybe every half hour or so, you could just kind of walk over to the stove and give it a stir, and it'll be fine. Okay, as long as you keep it on low, it won't burn. You've got to be careful. You don't want to burn the bottom of the pan. For a nice touch to the pasta dish, once we serve the meatballs and gravy, what I'm going to do is grate up some of this really great Italian grating cheese. It's called Asiago. It's actually aged Asiago, so you can see how crumbly it is. I'm just going to grate some of this, and I'm just going to serve this with the pasta. Has a great flavor, great aged flavor, and you can see how it is. It's crumbly. I like it shredded this way rather than using this fine grating here. I rather use the other one. Then I'm going to just sprinkle a little bit of this here and then put some on the table so that people can just add as much of this cheese. It's very, very similar to the taste of a regular Parmesan cheese that a lot of people do use for spaghetti sauce. Okay, now finally the pasta sauce, the sauce or the gravy as the old Italians used to call it. They're all ready. Nice and hot. And what I did was I just took a box of the rigatoni, and I'm just simply going to pour them in here like this. And then I'll just take the sauce. I don't put too much on it because people can add sauce to their own plates afterwards, and it's really good. This is really, really good. I tasted it, and here they are. Here are the meatballs. There it is. And then this is the Asiago that I was talking about before. Look at that. Delicious. Absolutely delicious. Okay, and there it is. There it is. Ready to go. And here's the leftover meatballs. I will serve those on the table too. I'll put those in another plate, and then they can add more sauce to the pasta and take as many meatballs as they want. And there you have it.